I couldn't believe my luck as I looked out at the beautiful forest framed by the big glass windows. I put my feet up on the sofa and I sighed contently. I've couch surfed a couple dozen times and I've had mostly great experiences. But this place took the cake. It's usually considered pretty good if you can get a room to yourself when you're couch surfing. I've slept in many living rooms, bunked with other couch surfers in tiny rooms, and on a few occasions, camped out on balconies. Hence, I came into this place without any expectations, prepared to take on whatever was offered. The host, Column, offered me the entire top floor. It was perched on a beautiful 3-storied house, which was nestled in a small clearing at the edge of a forest. It took a while to get to the place. Hitchhiking took me on many detours before I was within walking distance, but it was worth it. So worth it. I sipped my hot chocolate happily, counting my blessings at having landed at such a cushy couch surfing gig. All the host had requested in exchange for lodging was for me to hang out with him for dinner. Usually, hosts would request for guests to contribute something that could expand their horizons. For example, guests could teach them a foreign language, or cook them a cultural dish, or bring over some knickknacks from their hometown, etc. Hanging out with him for dinner seemed easy enough. He came off pretty decent in his profile, and he had many positive reviews from past couch surfers. I savored the creamy sweetness of the last drops of hot chocolate, and then placed the mug down on the coffee table. Without warning, a lazy wave of drowsiness washed over me. I was wiped, I realized. I had been propped up by the excitement of exploring a new place, checking out the beautiful new accommodations that I had for the next few nights. Now that I was settled in, the tendrils of sleep crept swiftly over me. I had a good few hours to rest before dinner. I happily tucked myself into the inner corner of the bed, marveling at the perfect balance it held between firmness and softness. It was going to be a good nap. I awoke with a kink in my back. I needed the knot loose, assuming that I must have slept in a wrong posture. On the bright side, I could smell dinner. I followed the delicious wafts down the stairs, and as I turned the corner of the last flight of steps, the sight that came into view warmed the impoverished cockles of my heart. I had been trying to stretch my travel budget as far as it would go, so the meals that I had had over the past week had consisted mainly of nearly expired sandwiches on discount, and biscuits. What lay on the dining table was a feast fit for a king or three. The various carbs, dips, platters, and mains spilled all across the oak surface, and best of all, they were all vegetarian. I know. I could eat everything there. My eyes actually prickled with tears as I realized the amount of effort and consideration my host had put in. Very few people remember my dietary preferences, which was fine with me, since there's no reason to put others out for my own choices. But this meal, it looked as if he had scrolled through my couch surfing profile and pictures to pick out the best dishes for me. And there was wine. Lots of wine. I briefly wondered how Colum could afford all these. The food, the house, the elegant furnishings. He looked barely older than 40. But I didn't ask. I figured he was one of those millionaire by 30 type of guys. Or it was family money. It wasn't my business to probe. Dinner lasted 3 hours, interspersed with bouts of my heartfelt gratitude. Callum turned out to be a great conversationalist. The conversation flowed naturally, and when it came time for sleep, he seemed reluctant for me to leave. He must have been lonely in this big house. I went to bed stuffed and epically contented. I stretched out under the covers and quickly fell asleep. I wasn't sure what time it was that I woke up. It was pitch black outside. I shifted about in discomfort. There was something hard pressing against my back. I felt the mattress, and my fingers slid over a bump in the bedding. Annoyed and puzzled, I dragged myself over to the other side of the bed. Smooth, comfortable. I shut my eyes and dozed off. I woke up again sometime later. My back was aching. I felt about beneath me, and once again, there was a big bump in the bedding. In the fog of sleep, my mind took a while to make sense of things. I was still sleeping on the other side of the bed. I hadn't shifted back to the side with the bumps. Was my weight shifting the bedding about? Puzzled, I started to really press down on the bump, feel about it, and then an icicle of fear seared through my chest. The bump felt like the shape of a face. I pulled back in horror. This can't be, I thought. I'm imagining things. I'm in a strange place in the dark and my mind is playing tricks on me. I forced down my fear, compressing it into a tiny, manageable size. Then I took a deep breath and pressed down on the bump again. Under the tight pressure, the shape of the bump began to show through the surface. A smooth bump, a curve here, another bump there. This time, there was no holding back the fear. My liquid froze in my veins. The shape of a face pressed clear against the bedsheet. A scream sprung up within me, but got caught in my throat. I was immobile, locked in my terror, hands still pressing down about the shape of the face. And then the face moved. That broke me free of my paralysis. The scream that was building within erupted into the night, and I clambered backwards, still screaming, eyes fixed on the bump. I fell off the bed but immediately picked myself up, legs already pumping. I flung the door open and half ran, half tripped my way down the stairs. The column shot into view, eyes wide with shock. I realized that he must have fallen asleep in the living room on the first floor. "What's happening? Are you okay?" I realized I was still screaming. I stopped abruptly and started sobbing instead. There's a face upstairs." The column looked at me, amazement appearing into the shock on his face. "I swear there's a face, in the bed, in the mattress." And column continued to look gobsmacked, and then he reached forward to take my arm and led me to the sofa. He was quiet for a long time, just watching as I wept the fear out of my system. When the tears finally stopped, I looked up to see bewilderment on his face. You can see her too," he said, his tone laced with wonderment. "Wait, what?" My eyes widened. "You can see her, my sister." I briefly considered running out into the night, sans backpack and necessities, but I made myself stay in my seat. "What do you mean, your sister?" A somber gloom settled on his face. His eyes hardened. "What you saw, the face, it belongs to my sister." He sounded guarded, defensive. I didn't know what to say. He looked at me for a moment and then sighed, his expression softening. "I guess I'll have to tell you. I should tell you. It's been so long, so many years of anguish." After a pause, he continued. "I killed my sister." Now I was really tempted to go running into the night. Phone, wallet, everything, forget about it. Instead, I sat stiffly on the sofa, muscles tensed and ready to flee. It was many years ago. She was evil. She did horrible things to me, often too, and she also did it to others. I had to stop her. Despite myself, I found myself intrigued. She was born with these abilities. She could do things to my mind. She would do bad things to me. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, a crushing weight on my chest, a body paralyzed. And there she would be, standing in the doorway just looking at me. Once I had a buddy over. I had left the house for less than a half an hour to get us all some beers, and when I returned, he was crushed under a shelf, shin shattered and poking out of his skin. It could have been an accident, except the shelf had been bolted onto the wall. I sat there for the next hour as these stories of his past unfolded. Her screaming in his mind until he almost went mad. Him coming to and realizing that he had been carving words into himself. Him seeing ants crawling under his skin and scratching streaks into his skin. One night, I had had enough. I knew that she had power, so I had to be very careful. I'm just glad she didn't have the mind-reading abilities. I wasn't even thinking about running anymore. I was fascinated, and I was also starting to feel sorry for him, more so than for his sister. That night, she had just inserted a nightmare into my head. Again, I knew that it was her because at the end of the nightmare, her face appeared. She was smirking. And when I woke up, there she was in the doorway, smirking. It was the last straw. Long story short, I made a plan. My sister loves wine and I loved wine, so I spiked one of the bottles. When my sister finally got to that bottle, she passed out and didn't wake up. He cleared his throat. Then I got rid of her. He darted a nervous look at me. I kept my face expressionless. But then I couldn't find a way to get rid of her out of the house without being seen by the live-in help, who lived in the converted shed in the garden. I fired her soon after though. I needed a way to get my sister's body out of the house without being seen. So I put her in the mattress and I sewed it back up. I flinched. That explained a lot. I spilled some wine on it as an excuse to get rid of the mattress and I dragged it out to dispose of it. I drove to another part of the forest and I buried it somewhere in there. But somehow her spirit stayed. She's been here and she's been tormenting me for the past decade. Just pacing about the house, showing up at random places. She can't get into the living room, but that's it. It's my only safe space. She can even follow me out of the house. She's weaker in death and she can't control me. Can't make things happen, not anymore. But her presence. And sometimes she still succeeds in inserting terrifying images into my head. That's why I've been hosting couch surfers. I need the company, the distraction. I need company to keep me sane. He looked at me anxiously, then a curious wonder seeped into his eyes. But no one else has been able to see her. No one but you. Wow, yay, lucky me, I thought. You're special. I think you're God sent to help me end this once and for all. I reconsidered running again. It sounded like he had done what he thought he had to do. He did it to protect himself and others, and I could understand that. I didn't agree with how he did it, but I couldn't say for sure. If I had been in his shoes, living in fear my whole life, that I would have done anything different. I didn't think that he was an evil man. But now, he was asking for my help to get rid of a vengeful ghost that was pushing things too far. I'm not an exorcist, I'm nobody, I'm just a traveler, I stammered. I just need you to say a few words, and I'll settle the rest. I looked at him in confusion. Say a few words, settle the rest. He looked thoughtful for a few moments, and then he spoke. Well, I guess I would best tell you, and there's no point in hiding it. I've been researching for years on how to get rid of her, and I finally found something worth pursuing. He walked over to the old teak cupboard and pulled out a box. He opened it, In it were a few candles, a jar of what seemed like black paint, a couple of trinkets, and a piece of paper. I read something this lady posted on an obscure website. Her mother and her are practitioners of arcane magic, and they had this way to bind a soul to the place. You just need to use this jar of, well, she didn't say exactly what it was, some type of mixture. You use it to paint some symbols on the floor of the house, and place these other objects in certain positions. He saw my raised eyebrow. You might not believe it, but it's true. I went to find the lady. I found them and followed them to one of their jobs. They were helping someone deal with a lingering spirit in the house. I couldn't see the ghost, but I felt it. They performed the ritual, chanted the name of the spirit, and then I felt it whoosh by me, heard a faint shriek, and suddenly, there was a dark shadow within the symbol that she had drawn. It was real. I checked in with the person who had hired them a few months later. He told me that he had moved out, and he hadn't been bothered by the spirit since. I know too, because once I placed this box in the cupboard here, she couldn't get near me. She couldn't even enter the living room. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Implausible story, twisted fairy tale aside, whether I believe you or not, why would you need me? You have the box of things that they gave you. Why don't you do it yourself? I was slowly inching towards the door as I spoke. He was beginning to sound unhinged, but at a subconscious level, I believed him. There was something undeniable in his eyes and the way that he told of the story. At the very least, he believed his words to be the truth. I need 2 people for the ritual. 2 people who can both see her. That was the requirement. That's why the lady and her mother had to work together. I could see where this was going, but I wasn't helping, no way. Even if I didn't believe in it, I wasn't about to humor him by dabbling in the dark arts. I am deep down a really superstitious person, and I was terrified of those things. Of the face upstairs. Are you sure that you were never in the spiritual field? He asked. It doesn't make sense that you can see her too. I've met so many people, hosted so many couch surfers, and none of them could ever detect her, much less see her the way that you did. What were you doing before you quit and took up traveling? I'm definitely not in the spiritual field. Like I said, I'm a superstitious person. I wouldn't go anywhere within 1,000 leagues of that field. I was a psychologist before I quit. You were a psychologist. Did you maybe do more alternative therapies, like hypnotism? No, definitely not, and to be honest, I quit because weird stuff kept happening to me. I quit to clear my head, to stay as far away from weird, supernatural things as I could. So no, I'm not gonna help you. Please. He grabbed my shoulders and stared intensely into my eyes. His eyes brimmed with desperation and pain. Unwillingly, I felt myself soften. I'm terrified of these things, okay? I'm not brave. I want to help you, but I really don't think I can. Take what you've experienced tonight and multiply it by tenfold. Then imagine living through it every single moment, every hour of your life for the next 10 years. I couldn't picture it. The intense horror, the crippling fear, stretching out into years. It was cruel to leave him to his fate. I regretted it even as I spoke. Okay, I'll help you, but we try it just once and then we're done, alright? Thank you. Oh God, you're my savior. Thank you. He wept in relief. But I need your phone. Mine's in the bedroom and no way I'm going up there. I need to let my people know where I am in case something goes wrong. I didn't mention that one of the things I thought would go wrong was him killing me to keep his crime quiet. He nodded and passed me his phone. I excused myself as he set up the ritual stuff and went to the edge of the living room, not stepping outside. I sent out a few messages and emails detailing my location and Column's details. and then I gasped and dropped the phone in shock. She was right in front of me staring. A dark silhouette, a shadow with a face. And then images flooded my brain. Colum, much younger, choking me out and then resuscitating me. Colum laughing as I gasped air into my lungs, and then doing it again. Colum getting rid of my pet hamster. Colum's friend taking advantage of me. Me getting free and sending the shelf crashing down on him. Colum firing shots into an older couple in one of the bedrooms. Colum calling the police to report a burglary attempt gone wrong, and that they had shot his parents. Colum threatening to get rid of me if I reported him, dragging me out of the bedroom as I screamed and screamed, tears pouring down my cheeks. Colum at the funeral, fake crying, and then flashing me a cold smile when he caught me staring. Colum breaking my arm with a door slam. That was the last image before I woke up to Colum shaking me. I nearly screamed when I saw his face. So similar was it to the image of him standing over me after resuscitating me. I don't know how I did it, but I kept a straight face. It was like every emotion within me was gone. I felt nothing but an unnatural calm and a sudden clear focus. I could not let him know what I knew. It was his sister's memories. She had inserted her memories in my head to explain her side of the story, why she had done the things she had. A plastered look of confusion was on my face. What happened? You fainted, you just fell to the floor. I faked a look of realization, followed by horror. I saw her. She appeared before me. I must have passed out from the shock. She can't get you anymore. Soon, she can't. Come on, we need to stop her. Permanently. He gestured to the odd symbols that he had written on the floor. All you need is to stand here. He marked a spot on the floor, and read the following. He passed me the piece of paper from the box. The words on the paper were unrecognizable, but he had written the English phonetic equivalents below. It was a strange tongue indeed, but one word stood out. Ava? I asked. Yeah, that's her name. We need to chant her name together and she would be bound to this space. Forever, I could move house and be free of her. Forever. Well, alright then, let's do this. Get it over with. I stood in the spot that he'd indicated and watched as Colum started the ritual. He was trembling with excitement and anticipation, proudly imagining a life free from his sister's wrath. He drew odd symbols in the air, making strange gestures, all the while chanting aloud words that I had never heard before, words that brought a chill down my spine. Ava appeared at the periphery of the room, unnoticed by Colum. She was trying to get closer but couldn't. I looked straight at her and then nodded, hoping that she could somehow grasp my intention. Colum reached the peak of his performance and gestured at me to read from the paper. I painstakingly pronounced each word, and then paused as he held out a palm to me, just before I reached the last word. We looked each other in the eyes and in perfect timing, we said the last word. Ava, he said. Colum, I said. Colum, I heard whispered from the dark figure at the edge of the room. Shock and confusion bloomed on Colum's face. It looked almost comical, juxtaposed against the arcane backdrop and the dark silhouette hovering behind him. And then the confusion on his face crumbled into anger. You, what have you done? He lunged at me and I ducked, scuttling out of the way. I turned back, half in fear, half in anticipation, and he leapt toward me. I flinched. But then he thudded into something invisible and fell back on the floor. He looked bewildered for a second, and then his face contorted into fear and horror. I spent the next 5 minutes just watching as he slammed again and again into the invisible barrier about him, cursing, weeping, screaming, begging. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I turned away, and then before my eyes, a beautiful young lady appeared. Ava now looked perfectly normal and seemed almost alive, except for the fact that I could see through her. She looked like the classic illustration of a ghost. Of a friendly ghost at least, for she was smiling. An exquisite, mesmerizing smile, which held such warmth and gratitude that my heart ached. "Thank you," she whispered. She reached out her hand and I reached out to touch it and watched entranced as she dissolved into the ether. Friggin' fairy tale indeed. I spoke aloud in wonder. I felt a strange, beatific sense of peace. I walked up the steps and I packed my stuff, still in a daze. I came back down, backpack slung on my shoulders. In my peculiar, blissful trance, I didn't even notice him yelling anymore. I was filled with an extraordinary pride and happiness for what I had done for Ava. I walked out into the night, not turning to look at Callum, whom I vaguely registered to still be yelling at me. "No, please, she got to you too. Come back, please." A momentary twinge of doubt bubbled up, and then I closed the heavy wooden door, muffling his screams. The bubble popped. I breathed in the fresh night air and began my walk to the main road.